E-bikes can be a really effective training tool as well as being lots of fun. So in this video, I'm going to show you an effective way of using your e-bike to get fit. So first, let's take a look at your effort and some training zones. Now, using that pedal assist, of course, you can get lots of boost, but by switching between those power levels, you can keep your input into the bike nice and steady. So let me explain that first. So training zones give you an effective way of seeing how hard and how much effort you're putting into those training sessions. And a good training program for mountain biking in general actually mixes up zone training. So you'll do shorter, more intense riding or training in those higher zones for your power and for speed. And if you drop down the zones, the training will be much less intense, but you'll go for longer durations. And to make those training sessions really effective, you want to stay within those zones, because if you go too high, you go into the higher zones, you actually have less energy, and it's a less effective training session going out of those zones. So that's why many pro mountain bikers actually use road bikes for training. It's much easier to get a consistent training session where you're staying within those zones, just because the bikes are really efficient, they roll super fast, and the terrain tends to be slightly less steep and punishing as a mountain bike ride can be. A cross-country ride, often you have to put in super high effort to get up maybe a technical climb. Whereas on a road bike, it's much easier to stay consistent. That's why mountain bikers do it. However, with an e-bike, you can now do those same training sessions. Not to mention that training on an e-bike for those pros gives them really valuable trail time for riding and practicing those skills whilst training that you don't get on a road bike, of course. Not to mention, it's much more fun. Now, I would recommend using a heart rate monitor for these training sessions. I always use one, to be honest. If you can mount it to your bars, even better. That does make it slightly easier to keep track of whilst you're using it. You can, of course, train without using one of these. With a bit of experience, you'll be able to judge how much effort you're putting in and how high you think your heart rate is already. But I do think a heart rate monitor takes away that guessing. They do take a little bit of learning how to use, and you'll learn things like your maximum heart rate, how things like caffeine and the amount of sleep also affect your heart rate. But for me, it's a great indicator of how hard I'm going, and I really know from that number on there how long I can sustain that effort. The most accurate way of judging how much effort you're putting in is actually through a power meter. I've got to say, they're not easy things to fit to e-bikes. You can either have pedal mounted ones, cranks, or even hubs, but as far as I know, I've not seen one of those fit to an e-bike just yet. Specialized do have their mission control app that will give you your power output and the bike's power output that we recently showed in our e-bikes cheating video, but that is only something you can use after a ride. However, that is still pretty useful information for keeping track of your rides and how effective those training sessions are. So let's look at an effective training session for building that base fitness, something that I would do in winter for getting my endurance up to speed. So for a good endurance training ride, what I'm trying to do is keep my heart rate in about zone 3, which is 155 beats per minute or below. So that's a good amount of effort for me, but it's nowhere near out of breath. So what I'm gonna do is use my power modes. So riding in trail mode most of the time, I'll be then toggling up to turbo on those steeper inclines, just so I don't really peak my heart rate, get out of zone 3, up towards threshold. That will reduce my overall ride time and how much time I can spend in zone 3. So it's really a case of using my power modes up and down all the time to try and keep my heart rate as consistent as possible. Obviously, if I use my zones too much, so if I'm too high on the power on my bike, I'm going to burn my battery much quicker and I won't be able to get the decent amount of time. And this ride, really, I'm looking for 2 to 3 hours in that zone would be a super effective ride. For me, the great thing about using an e-bike for these longer, more endurance rides is I can get to ride the proper mountain bike trails that I like to ride. If I was doing this normally in the past, I would use a cross-country bike. And I find to keep my heart rate down, I'd have to go super slow on these trails. Or in fact, more often than not, actually go and ride more mellow trails. So past bridleways, just to keep it more consistent. But an e-bike lets me have great fun, ride the proper trails and keep my heart rate low. So these types of rides for me feel like I settle into a pace and I just try and hold that for as long as I can. I'll take the occasional glance at my heart rate monitor just to make sure I'm there or thereabouts, but to be honest, not very often. I'll just get a good feel for it. And again, using that power up and down to make sure I don't peak or trough too much. Also on the downhills, I'll try and ride at the same sort of pace. So if you start trying to cruise too much, you will drop your heart rate down, you'll start recovering, but that's not what I'm aiming for. You can go too hard. If you really try and work it like a downhill track and work super hard, you get your heart rate super high without even pedaling. So somewhere in the middle for me, where I'm trying to pump stuff. Again, ride at a good amount of speed so it's fun and trying to keep my heart rate about the same level. And then really I'm just trying to ride for as long as I possibly can until myself run out of energy or my battery runs out. So I'm looking for 2 to 3 hours if I can. So there you go, that's one simple way of using your e-bike to train, and I'd love to hear what you guys have been doing. I know in one of the EMBN shows we had a comment saying someone had done 100 kilometers on their e-bike and used all the battery. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have been up to. Let us know down below in the comments. If you want to see a video about motor fundamentals, click up there. Give us a thumbs up if you like using an e-bike for everything and hit that subscribe button.